The moment the chamber doors slammed shut, a hush rolled across the council like a cold wave. No one expected humanity to walk out. Not after months of negotiation, not after endless promises of cooperation, not after all the speeches about unity and shared futures. Yet there it was, an empty seat where Earth's envoy had been moments earlier, still rocking slightly as if the force of their departure lingered in the air. For the first time, the council felt something they were not used to feeling: fear. Not because humanity was the strongest species in the galaxy, or the most advanced, or the most numerous, but because humanity had become something far more unsettling, unpredictable, wounded, and tired of being underestimated. It had all started with a simple question, one that should have been harmless. What does humanity want? The envoy had answered with patience at first, carefully explaining Earth's plea for fair treatment, equal rights, and genuine peace. But the council had dismissed those requests with small smiles and polite nods, the kind used when adults humor a child. They believed humans were stubborn, emotional, and prone to dramatic displays. They believed Earth's desperation for survival would keep them compliant. They believed humanity would never risk standing alone. And in that belief, the council made their first fatal error. The second error came when the council introduced the proposal. A treaty that looked generous on the surface: trade routes, defense guarantees, shared research, but hid layers of restrictions beneath, the kind that would quietly chain Earth for generations. Some species accepted such deals without protest. Some even welcomed the protection. But the human envoy simply stared at the glowing document as though reading the future it promised, and their expression changed in a way the council couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger, though anger was there. It wasn't despair, though that lingered at the edges. It was disappointment. Deep, aching disappointment. As if humanity had hoped the galaxy would be different than the old patterns they had struggled with back home. The envoy stood, calm yet steady, and the room shifted. "You want our loyalty," they said softly, "but you do not want us to stand as equals. You want our service, our creativity, our sacrifices, but on terms that keep us small?" The council exchanged glances, confused by the human's tone. For them, this was simply how power worked. For humanity, it was a familiar wound reopened. When the envoy gathered their things, no one stopped them. No one believed a species so young, so comparatively fragile, would dare step away from the most powerful alliance in known space. The door shut behind the human, and the echo of that departing stride struck harder than any threat. Now the chamber felt heavier. The council members whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what had happened. Some insisted humanity would return once they realized the cost of isolation. Others argued this might be a ploy for better terms. But only a few recognized the emptiness in that seat for what it truly was. Humans didn't storm out. They didn't bluff, they didn't posture without reason. When humanity walked away, it meant a line had been crossed. Outside the chamber, reports were already coming in. Human ships leaving orbit, human diplomats refusing calls, human colonies broadcasting a single message to the stars: "We will not bow, we will not break, not again." The galaxy had always known humans were resilient, but resilience paired with resolve was something entirely different. Something dangerous. Something powerful. Something the council had not planned for. Inside the chamber, the realization finally settled. Humanity had not simply left the negotiations, they had withdrawn their trust. And trust, once broken, was a force not even the most advanced species could easily rebuild. A quiet alarm rippled through the council as they considered the consequences. A species known for turning hopeless odds into victories had now been pushed into a corner, and everyone in the room understood what humans often did when pushed. Yet, even as the council tried to piece together their next steps, none of them knew what humanity planned now. No one knew if Earth intended to stand alone, seek new allies, or forge a path untouched by any council decree. All they knew was that the humans were silent, and that silence felt like the calm before something vast and unstoppable. And somewhere beyond the chamber walls, the human envoy paused, looking out at the stars with a decision in mind that would change the fate of every world watching. But what that decision was, no one yet knew. The envoy stood in the quiet passageway just outside the chamber, hands resting on the railing as if grounding themselves against the swell of emotions pressing in. The stars beyond the window glimmered like distant watchers, cold and patient, holding secrets older than any council. For a long moment, the envoy didn't move. The weight of what had just happened, a single choice made in front of countless eyes, hung on their shoulders, like a cloak both heavy and strangely freeing. This wasn't how Earth imagined the peace talks would end. Humanity had arrived with hope, not defiance. Yet hope had a way of shifting when people realized they were expected to give more than they would ever be given. To understand how things had reached this moment, you had to look back far beyond the council halls, beyond the glowing banners and diplomatic ceremonies. Humanity's presence among the stars had always been a strange thing. They were newcomers, late to interstellar travel, and burdened by a history filled with mistakes and second chances. When humanity first made contact with the wider galaxy, they were met with awe, curiosity, and caution. Many species admired Earth's creativity and resilience, but others saw something unpredictable in humans, something uncomfortably familiar, like a spark of fire that could warm or destroy depending on which way the wind blew. For years, humanity worked hard to prove they belonged. They took part in joint missions, offered scientific discoveries, opened their colonies for shared development. Humans adapted faster than anyone expected. They listened, learned, and reshaped themselves to fit into the delicate structure of galactic diplomacy. But even as they adapted, old habits and instincts remained. Humans had survived conflicts, disasters, and their own flaws. They carried stories of struggle in their bones. And while they wanted peace, they also wanted dignity. It was a simple wish, but somehow the Council kept treating it like an unreasonable demand. The Council itself had its own history, a long one shaped by alliances, quiet rivalries, and old wounds hidden beneath polished speeches. Many of its members came from species that had known war long before humans ever looked to the sky. They had built their laws and systems for stability above all else, even if stability sometimes came at the cost of fairness. Most species accepted this because it was safer than standing alone. But humanity was different. They had not come from a world shaped by strict hierarchies or ancient galactic orders. They came from a world where freedom carried meaning, where ordinary people had stood up against impossible odds many times and survived. That difference was the core of the conflict, even if no one said it aloud. As the envoys stood in the hallway, memories of earlier meetings flickered through their mind, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, deals that sounded fair until the fine print appeared, compliments balanced with subtle warnings. Humanity had offered transparency. The Council had offered something else, a carefully controlled version of partnership that felt more like ownership. In the weeks before the final negotiation, whispers had reached the envoy from other species' quiet admissions that they too had once felt trapped by the Council's expectations. Some had tried to protest and were ignored. Others had grown used to accepting less than what they deserved. A few even hinted that they hoped humanity might succeed where they could not. Humans, after all, had a reputation for doing the unexpected. But no one expected humanity to walk out. Inside the chamber, panic had begun to spread in small, subtle ways. Not open fear, no council member would allow themselves to show that, but something sharper, concern, regret, and beneath that, a realization that the balance of power they relied on might be shifting. Humanity withdrawing from the talks didn't just threaten diplomatic relations. It threatened the careful structure the Council had built over centuries. Back on Earth and across human colonies, the message had spread quickly. News channels replayed the moment the envoy left the chamber, analyzing every detail. Some voices praised the decision as a stand for justice. Others worried about what the galaxy might do in response. But all agreed on one thing: something had changed. Humanity was no longer willing to bend. The envoy finally pushed away from the railing. Their reflection in the window looked calm, but beneath that calm lived a storm. They knew Earth would ask questions. They knew the Council would demand explanations. And they knew the galaxy was watching with interest, waiting to see what humanity would do next. But the envoy also knew something the Council did not, something that had been forming quietly in the background. Humans across different worlds had been connecting, sharing stories and frustrations, building a network of voices that grew stronger with each passing day. They weren't preparing for war, but they were preparing for something just as powerful: unity. A unity the Council could not control. As the envoy started down the hallway, distant alarms chimed softly, alerts of shifting ship formations, diplomatic messages incoming, colonies signaling changes in status. The galaxy's pulse was quickening, reacting to a choice that could not be undone. And somewhere, hidden within that growing tension, a new question began to rise. If humanity refused to bow, what would they rise into instead? No one had the answer. Not yet, but the next step was coming, whether the Council was ready or not. Deep inside the Council station, far from the public halls and polished viewing decks, a smaller chamber buzzed with quiet urgency. Representatives from several species had gathered without announcing it, an unofficial meeting, the kind where no one wanted their words recorded or traced. They spoke in low voices, many glancing at the door as if expecting the human envoy to return at any moment. But they knew humanity would not come back, not to this room, not in the same way. And that fear, quiet but sharp, hung over every conversation. One representative, tall and covered with iridescent plates, leaned forward and whispered what everyone else had been too cautious to say. "We pushed them too far." The others shifted uncomfortably. Admitting fault was rare among the Council elite. But the truth had become impossible to ignore. Humanity's departure wasn't a loud threat. It wasn't a declaration of rebellion or a dramatic speech meant to stir the galaxy. It was silent, and silence from humans meant they were already planning something. The main conflict wasn't simply between humanity and the Council. It was between two visions of the future. The Council believed peace could exist only if each species fit neatly into their designated place. Humanity believed peace required fairness, not hierarchy. And now that those visions had collided, the galaxy stood on the edge of something no one could fully predict. While the secret meeting continued, the human envoy walked through the docking bay, watching ships lift away one after another. The air vibrated with engines preparing for departure. But beneath that mechanical hum lay an emotional tension that pulsed like a heartbeat. Crews whispered updates about new messages coming from different human colonies. Some colonies were demanding independence from Council influence. Others were calling for stronger alliances with species outside the Council entirely. A few even suggested creating a new coalition, one where humanity would not be placed at the bottom of any hierarchy. The envoy didn't know which path Earth would choose, but they knew one thing for certain: whatever decision came next, it would not be made out of fear. The Council, however, felt fear rising quickly. Fear that humanity's withdrawal would inspire others. Fear that long silent worlds might begin questioning the structure they had accepted for generations. And fear that if humans were pushed further, they might stop trying to negotiate entirely. One Council advisor, old and cautious, reviewed countless reports from the past week. Each one painted the same troubling pattern. Humanity had been underestimated not because of their technology or numbers, but because of their ability to turn frustration into purpose. Humans didn't crumble under pressure. They transformed it. What unsettled the advisor even more were the rumors spreading in the lower levels of the Council station. Workers from different species were quietly expressing admiration for Earth's boldness. Some said they wished their leaders would act the same. Others believed the humans were fighting not just for themselves, but for everyone forced into quiet compliance by Council rules. The idea was spreading faster than anyone expected, almost like a spark moving through dry grass. Meanwhile, aboard one of the human transport ships preparing to undock, a small team reviewed data from the envoy's final meeting. They weren't soldiers or strategists, they were analysts, researchers, and diplomats who had watched the Council's subtle restrictions tighten over the years. One of them replayed the moment the treaty proposal appeared on the screen. It still made the entire room fall silent. Not because the treaty was harsh, but because it was designed to appear generous. It offered help, but only in ways that would leave humanity dependent. The team understood now that this wasn't an oversight or misunderstanding, it was intentional. A system meant to keep Earth from rising too quickly. And that realization changed everything. But the conflict didn't stop there. Across several human colonies, local leaders were receiving quiet visits from off-world envoy species who had never dared to speak openly before. Some offered information, some offered resources. A few offered something even more unexpected: support. Not formal alliances, but the promise of cooperation if the galaxy shifted toward a new order. These species were tired of watching decisions made by a council that no longer represented them. Humanity's walkout had shaken loose years of silence, but every potential ally came with risks. If the council discovered these new conversations, they might act before humanity could finish building anything resembling unity. And the council still had far more military strength, far more influence, far more experience in controlling dissent. Back in the docking bay, the human envoy received a private message. The sender was not from Earth, nor from any allied species. It came from a world known for its neutrality, a world that rarely involved itself in conflict. The message contained only a few words, but those words carried weight. You were right to walk away, but be careful. The council is not done with you. The envoy stared at the message, feeling the meaning settle like cold stone. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. The council would not allow humanity's actions to spread without response. And humanity, for the first time in generations, was preparing to push back. Yet neither side knew just how far the other was willing to go. And as the human ships began to pull away from the station, a quiet tension filled the space between stars, an unspoken warning that something vast was beginning to shift. And no one knew what the next move would bring. The human ships drifted farther from the council station, their engines glowing softly as they slid into the dark. But even from a distance, the envoy could feel the eyes of the galaxy pressing and watching, waiting, trying to guess what humanity's next step would be. Every channel the envoy checked was filled with speculation. Some predicted a new alliance rising from the ashes of the failed peace talks. Others warned that the council would move quickly to reassert control. A few whispered of things older and deeper, forces that had been quiet for too long, now stirred by humanity's unexpected defiance. The envoy didn't know which rumors were true, but they knew one thing: nothing about this moment was ordinary. Inside the human command ship, the air carried a tense calm. Officers moved with careful focus, speaking in low voices as updates poured in from across human territory. Colonies were reinforcing their defenses not for battle, but as a precaution. Trading partners were asking pointed questions about the council's intentions. Neutral species were quietly requesting meetings. The galaxy, once comfortably predictable, was tilting. And the closer it tilted toward the unknown, the more humanity felt that they had stepped onto a path they couldn't turn back from. A soft alert chimed across the bridge. The envoy turned to one of the monitors and saw an encrypted message waiting. This one came from a human research station orbiting a distant star. The message described unusual activity near the edge of council-controlled spaceships, gathering in patterns that didn't match any scheduled patrols. They weren't approaching humanity directly, but their formation suggested something was being prepared, something big, something secret. The envoy read the report twice, then sent it to Earth with a priority tag. Whatever the council was planning, they weren't wasting time. Meanwhile, the council's private chambers had become a storm of argument. Voices echoed off the curved walls as leaders debated what to do. Some argued that humanity must be brought back into line gently, through renewed negotiations and promises of reform. Others insisted that allowing humanity to remain independent even symbolically could unravel the entire political structure. And then there were those who suspected a deeper danger. They had seen how quickly humans adapted, how fiercely they defended their values, how easily they united when pushed. A species like that, some leaders said, could become a rival to the council itself. The more they talked, the clearer it became. The council was not united. They were fractured, and humanity's departure had exposed every single crack. Across the galaxy, those cracks were beginning to widen. On a small council world, citizens marched through the streets holding glowing signs demanding fairness for all species. On another world, young scientists debated whether humanity's ideas about equal representation were better than the council's ancient hierarchy. Even among council officers, quiet conversations had begun, questions whispered behind closed doors. doubts shared only with trusted friends. The idea that humanity had been mistreated was spreading, and ideas, unlike ships or treaties, could not be contained by force. Back aboard the human ship, the envoy met with Earth's leadership via secure link. The room filled with holographic figures, each carrying the weight of millions behind them. They discussed the Council's movements, the strange gathering of ships, and the growing support humanity was receiving from unexpected corners. But beneath the strategic updates and diplomatic exchanges lay a single shared fear: humanity might be running out of time. The envoy reported the message from the neutral world, the warning that the Council was not finished. Silence filled the room as leaders absorbed it. They all knew the Council preferred control over confrontation, but if they believed humanity threatened the balance of power, they might choose a more direct approach. Before the meeting ended, another alert flashed. This one came from a listening post near a long-forgotten border. A transmission had been intercepted, scrambled, faint, but unmistakably official. It referenced the plan. One marked urgent, involving containment before escalation. No names were mentioned, but the meaning was clear. Humanity was the escalation. The envoy felt a cold chill settle in their chest. This wasn't just about a treaty or a broken negotiation. The Council was preparing for something larger, something that could decide humanity's place in the galaxy for generations. While the debate continued, the envoy walked to the observation deck. The stars stretched out in a silent tapestry, beautiful and distant, as if unaware of the tension building between worlds. Yet something felt different. The darkness no longer felt empty. It felt like a breath held too long, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the entire galaxy was leaning forward, waiting to see what humanity would do. A soft voice broke the quiet. One of the officers approached, holding a tablet. "Another report just came in," they said. "You need to see this." The envoy looked at the screen. Their heart tightened. A fleet was moving. Not toward Earth, not toward the colonies. Toward a location no one had expected, one that raised more questions than answers. And in that moment, the envoy understood. Whatever was coming, it would change everything. And the point of no return was already behind them. The envoy stared at the report, their breath tightening as the fleet's trajectory blinked across the screen. It wasn't heading toward any human territory. It wasn't even moving toward a contested region. Instead, it was traveling toward an unmarked, zone-quiet space with no colonies, no trade routes, no strategic value on any official map. That alone made the situation unsettling. But what made it worse was the note attached at the end of the transmission. Long-range scanners detect unknown structures in the region, previously undocumented. Unknown structures. That phrase alone was enough to raise every alert flag humanity had. The envoy handed the tablet back slowly. Their thoughts raced. If the Council had known about something hidden out there, something they never revealed to any species, especially humans, then this fleet movement was not a reaction. It was preparation, or worse, protection. And the fact that the Council was rushing ships toward it right now meant whatever was out there had suddenly become important. Or dangerous. The envoy returned to the bridge where officers were already pulling up star charts, overlays, old exploration logs. The area in question had been scanned decades ago by automated probes. Nothing unusual had been recorded at the time. No signals, no anomalies, just empty space. So how could structures suddenly appear now? A young analyst turned in her seat, worry tightening her voice. "It's not just the Council fleet. 2 other species have ships moving toward the same region. They're trying to mask their signatures, but our sensors picked them up." The room fell silent. That meant the Council wasn't the only one who knew. The envoy closed their eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Something was happening behind the scenes, something that involved more than treaties or politics. And somehow, humanity had stumbled into the center of it by refusing to accept the Council's terms. Meanwhile, back in the Council station, the private meeting had erupted into chaos. A representative slammed a trembling hand on the table. "If they find out what's out there, everything collapses, every alliance, every law, every promise we've made for centuries," others hissed in protest, demanding calm. But calm was already gone. Secrets were unraveling faster than they could be hidden. A council advisor stood in the shadows watching the argument unfold. They had warned the council leadership years ago that burying the truth would only delay the consequences. Now those consequences were arriving faster than anyone expected. Humanity's departure had accelerated everything. The advisor slipped out of the chamber quietly, heading toward a secure communications room. Someone needed to be warned, someone who might still understand what was at stake. Back on the human command ship, the Envoy's secure link pinged an incoming transmission flagged anonymous. The officers froze. Anonymous transmissions were dangerous, usually ignored. But something about the timing set off a cold intuition. The Envoy stepped into a private alcove and accepted the call. A hooded figure appeared, their face blurred, their voice distorted. "You forced their hand," the figure whispered. They weren't ready to move yet. They wanted more time. More time for what? The Envoy asked, keeping their tone steady. The figure hesitated. There is something out there the Council has been hiding for generations. It's not a weapon. Not exactly. It's history, evidence. If it's uncovered, everything changes. Your place in the galaxy, every species' place. They're terrified you'll reach it first. The Envoy's pulse quickened. Why tell me this? Because I've seen what happens when an entire galaxy is built on a lie, the figure answered softly. And because you're the only ones who ever question the order of things, before the Envoy could ask anything else, the transmission cut off. They returned to the bridge, face pale, mind racing. Prepare for immediate course adjustment, they said. We're going after the fleet. Officers exchanged startled looks. But Earth hasn't approved. This isn't about orders anymore, the Envoy said. This is bigger than politics. Bigger than our conflict with the Council. If they're hiding something that could shift the balance of power, we can't ignore it. As the human ship angled toward the unknown region, messages from Earth and various colonies filled the channel's warnings, questions, concerns. But under all the noise was something else. Anticipation. Humanity sensed the shift too. They didn't know the details, but they felt the stakes rising like a current pulling them toward something vast. Hours into the journey, the human ships detected faint energy readings ahead, signals that didn't match any known technology. The air on the bridge thickened with tension. Even the engines hummed differently, as if the ship itself sensed they were approaching a threshold. Then, without warning, another alert flashed. This one wasn't from space. It was from Earth, a high-priority message. Unidentified ships have entered human space. Not hostile, but demanding immediate dialogue. They claim to have knowledge about what lies in that region. They say humanity is in danger. The Envoy stared at the screen, heart pounding. Another twist? Another threat? Or maybe a warning? Humanity was now caught between the Council's concealed truth, a mysterious fleet entering their territory, and an unknown structure waiting ahead in the dark. And the Envoy understood, with chilling clarity, that whatever happened next would determine not just humanity's fate, but the fate of every species watching the stars shift around them. The Envoy stood at the center of the bridge as the human fleet glided into the unmarked region. A strange glow pulsed ahead, soft, steady, almost like a heartbeat moving through space itself. As the ships drew closer, the unknown structures came into view. They were enormous, silent, smooth formations that didn't look built so much as grown. Pale lines of light ran along their surfaces in patterns that felt deliberate, like a language waiting to be spoken. The entire bridge fell silent. It was the kind of silence that made every breath feel louder than it should. Then one of the officers gasped, "These readings, they're ancient, older than any Council species, older than anything on record." The Envoy stared, unable to look away. Something inside those structures resonated faintly, stirring a feeling they didn't recognize, like déjà vu, but impossibly deeper. Before they could speak, a burst of light swept across the region as the Council fleet dropped out of jump space, forming a tight perimeter around the structures. Seconds later, ships from 2 other species appeared as well, their engines glowing with urgency. Everyone had come at once. Everyone wanted answers. A transmission opened. The Council's highest-ranking speaker appeared, tension in every line of their face. "Human Envoy," they said, "turn your fleet around. This site is off limits to all species. But the envoy didn't respond right away. "What is this place?" they finally asked. "What have you been hiding?" The speaker hesitated, the question shaking something in their expression. "It was not meant to be discovered." "Not yet." Another voice cut into the channel one of the ships that had entered human space earlier. They'd finally caught up. Their representative spoke quickly, fear coloring their tone. "They're not telling you the truth. These structures are part of the Origin Network. It was created by the first intelligent civilization in the galaxy. They recorded histories, maps, knowledge, and messages. Messages meant for whoever arrived next." The council speaker's face tightened. Their voice dropped low. "Those messages are dangerous. If every species knew the truth of how the galaxy began, of who truly shaped its borders, we would plunge into chaos." The envoy felt their pulse hammering. "So you hid it?" "From everyone. We preserved peace," the speaker corrected sharply. "Revealing the truth would destroy the balance that keeps us alive." The envoy looked at the structures again. The glowing lines pulsed faster now, reacting to the presence of so many ships. The human scanners picked up a soft vibration, almost like a call. Humanity hadn't done anything to activate it. It was responding on its own, as if sensing something familiar. A sudden alert rang out across the human bridge. The structures were opening. Panels of light unfolded like petals, revealing a core that shimmered with shifting patterns. A signal burst forth, a projection of symbols and images that filled the region. Every ship recorded it. Every species saw it. But the message wasn't what the council feared. It wasn't a warning of war. It wasn't a secret about power or territory. It was a story of the galaxy's beginnings. A story of how countless worlds evolved from the same ancient spark. A story showing that no species was chosen or lesser, only different branches of the same shared origin. It was unity, not division. And at the very end, one final line of symbols emerged. The envoy's translation screen blinked 3 words: "You are ready." The council speaker stared, stunned. This was the truth they had hidden, that no species was meant to rule over another. That equality wasn't a threat, but the natural order the galaxy's first civilization had intended. The envoy exhaled slowly. "This doesn't destroy peace," they said softly. "It finally makes it possible." The council was silent. Some looked ashamed. Others relieved. A few still resisted, but their arguments held no weight now, not with the Origin Network revealing everything. For the first time, humanity wasn't standing alone. Dozens of species reached out, sending messages of support. Calls for new treaties, new laws, new cooperation. The galaxy was shifting, not through force, not through control, but through truth. The envoy watched the structures fold back into silence, their message delivered at last. The council speaker lowered their head. "Human envoy, we were wrong." Humanity accepted the apology not with pride, but with a steady resolve. A new council would be formed, one built on equal voice rather than hierarchy. The old system had ended. A new era had begun. But just as the fleets began to withdraw, a second, unexpected pulse rippled from the structures, faint, fragmented, almost like a whisper. The envoy leaned forward, trying to catch the signal as it flickered across the monitors. The translation system struggled, then finally produced a single phrase: "Others are coming." The envoy felt the breath stall in their chest. The structures weren't just leaving a message. They were sending a warning. And the galaxy's true test was only beginning. The dust was still settling over the old courtyard when everyone finally realized the danger had passed. For a long moment, no one spoke. It was as if silence itself needed time to breathe again after everything that had happened. Usha stood in the center, her hands still trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. The final twist she had uncovered felt almost unreal, even after the chaos of the climax. She had spent so long fighting to uncover the truth, but now that everything was out in the open, a strange calm washed over her. It wasn't relief exactly, more like the mind taking a cautious step toward normalcy after refusing to trust anything for too long. Rafi walked to her side, brushing dirt from his jacket. He gave her a small nod, as if asking whether she was really all right. She nodded back, though her eyes said she was still processing the truth. The others slowly gathered around them, still whispering over what they had seen and learned. The second twist had shaken them all, not because it was dramatic, but because it changed how they viewed the entire journey. It wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was about what those secrets had turned them into. HFY looked around at the faces she had come to trust, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she saw something new in them, something hopeful. The conflict that had stretched through every part of their lives was finally over. The fear that had once controlled them had no place here anymore. Even the air felt lighter, as if the entire space was finally allowed to rest. But endings are rarely as sharp or clear as climaxes. Life didn't flip into perfection simply because the truth was out. There were still subplots lingering gently in the background, questions waiting to be answered, and quiet uncertainties that needed time. HFY knew that. Everyone did. But there was a sense of direction now, a quiet confidence that things could be rebuilt. Rafi stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear him. He told her that the community was already talking about how to move forward, how to protect each other better, how to learn from everything that happened. HFY nodded, listening intently. Part of her wanted to collapse from exhaustion. Another part of her felt strangely energized, knowing she could finally start fixing what had been broken. She walked toward the old wooden steps near the doorway, her fingers lightly touching the carved markings she once overlooked. They felt different now, less mysterious, more familiar. She realized how many nights she had stood here wondering whether she would ever find answers. Now she stood in the same place, not with answers in her hands, but with peace in her heart. The others spread out across the courtyard, checking on the damaged spots and talking quietly about repairs. Someone laughed softly for the first time in days. Another person shared a warm cup of tea, passing it around like it was a symbol of something bigger, unity, maybe, or simple human kindness. Small actions, but they mattered. HFY took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She thought about everything that had happened, the danger, the twists, the moments of suspense where she almost lost hope. But she also remembered the courage she had found in herself and in the people around her. That was something she wanted to carry forward. The journey had changed her, but in a way that made her stronger. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the ground, she felt someone approach from behind. It was one of the elders who had once doubted her. He apologized softly, saying he hadn't understood her determination or the truth behind her worries. She accepted the apology with a gentle smile. There was no anger left in her anymore, only clarity. Holding on to resentment now felt unnecessary, like trying to carry something heavy after learning how light life could be without it. The group gathered one last time before dispersing. Plans were made, responsibilities shared, and small hopes spoken aloud. It wasn't a formal meeting, just a natural moment where everyone recognized this new chapter beginning. HFY felt the importance of it, even though it was simple. When the last of the evening light stretched across the courtyard, HFY and Rafi walked toward the exit. The calm that followed wasn't dramatic or grand, it was warm, steady, and human. She looked back once more, not with fear, but with gratitude. Everything they had gone through, the suspense, the rising stakes, the intense climax had led to this soft, real sense of closure. As they stepped onto the quiet road outside, HFY realized something important. Stories don't end just because the danger fades. They end when the people inside them choose what comes next. And now, at last, she was ready to choose peace, healing, and a future shaped not by fear, but by the strength she had found along the way. And with that quiet decision, the story came to its natural end, simple, human, and full of hope.